Well, hey everybody. Thank you for being here in person and virtually. As you know, we are here to discuss Katherine Miller's book, At the Table, The Chef's Guide to Advocacy. And I'll start introductions of the panel, starting with Katherine herself. Katherine Miller, a pioneering force in the food and beverage industry, is acclaimed for her innovative advocacy work, notably highlighted in her recent book, At the Table, The Chef's Guide to Advocacy. Drawing from her extensive experience at the James Beard Foundation Chefs Bootcamp for Policy and Change, Miller empowers chefs to utilize their culinary skills for social and environmental impact. As the founding executive director of the Chef Action Network and former vice president of impact at the James Beard Foundation, she has played instrumental roles in shaping culinary policy. Miller's multifaceted career spans global activism, award-winning campaigns, and contributions to food system reform. Additionally, she shares her expertise as an adjunct professor at the Culinary Institute of America. Residing in Washington, D.C., Miller continues to champion education, activism, and social change alongside her husband, Lou, and their cat, Lily.
You gotta put the cat in there.
You gotta put the cat in there. Katie Button, we're going to actually go down. Let's see, William Disson, let's do that. William Disson, a renowned chef from Asheville, North Carolina, is celebrated for his unwavering commitment to sustainability in the culinary world. Raised in West Virginia's Appalachian Mountains, Disson's culinary journey began on his grandparents' farm, where he learned the art of transforming fresh produce into delicious meals. After formal culinary training at the Culinary Institute of America, he refined his skills under esteemed chefs like Peter Timmons and Donald Barrickman. Disson holds a master's degree in hospitality and opened his own restaurant focusing on Appalachian cuisine, in which I say this Appalachian cuisine translates into his menu at the marketplace, and he recently was nominated for Outstanding Restaurant by the James Beard Foundation. Beyond the kitchen, he's a vocal advocate for sustainable practices, including ocean sustainability, lobbying Capitol Hill, and serving in the Chef Corps at the U.S. State Department, promoting sustainable culinary culture worldwide. And Katie Button, co-founder of Crudité in Asheville, North Carolina, is a culinary visionary celebrated for shaping the culinary landscapes with diverse restaurants, online platforms, and immersive culinary experiences. Recognized as one of Food and Wine's best new chefs in 2015, she led Crudité to accolades such as James Beard Foundation's Outstanding Hospitality Award in 2022. Katie's journey, rooted in Southern cooking, spans prestigious culinary experiences worldwide, including Il Bulli in Spain and Jean-Georges in New York City. Katie's innovative ventures like La Bodega by Crudité and Crudité at Home have thrived, showcasing her commitment to culinary excellence and community engagement. Katie's dedication to serving her community extends to her work with Haywood Street's Church Downtown Welcome Table program, providing authentic restaurant experiences to those who lack the opportunity to do so. As co-founder and executive chef of Katie Button Restaurants alongside her business partner, Felix Mina, Chief Experience Officer, Katie remains dedicated to driving new business opportunities and growth. And Mirwan Irani, a culinary advocate for diversity and cultural exchange, is the founder, chef, and CEO of Chai Pani Restaurant Group, where he seamlessly blends Indian and Southern flavors, challenging culinary norms and pioneering innovation in Indian, Southern, and American cuisine. In 2017, Irani expanded his culinary empire by launching Spicewalla, an e-commerce platform offering 250 premium spices, enriching his culinary repertoire. Recognized by Time magazine as one of the 31 people changing the South, Irani's remarkable contributions have earned him 5 James Beard Award semifinalist nominations for Best Chef. Southeast. His restaurants, acclaimed by national publications like the New York Times, are renowned favorites. Under Irani's visionary leadership, the Chai Pani Restaurant Group has grown to encompass 6 esteemed establishments, including Badawala in West Asheville. And Chai Pani has plans to move to a larger space coming very soon. And I feel like we also need to mention that Chai Pani won the 2022 Outstanding Restaurant Award for James Beard Foundation. So welcome, everybody. Let's get this party started, right? So I'm going to start with you, Katherine. So can you share the motivation behind creating At the Table and what inspired you to explore the intersection of food, advocacy, and societal change?
Oh, such a big question. The inspiration behind the book At the Table, The Chef's Guide to Advocacy, was really to sort of democratize a program that we had created at the Beard Foundation that was pretty elite, right? We trained 45 chefs a year, year after year for about a decade, and the program still continues today. And that's 300 some odd people, right? A book reaches many more than that. And also because there is sort of a recipe for change in the book, I learned, actually, I should say, the penny sort of dropped for me about chefs and their role in our society and their role in the food system, because they are at the intersection of almost every aspect of it, right? From the lemons to the linens, from the farm to the food waste, right? All of the things that a restaurant touches make it a perfect place to sort of translate complex subjects like soil, right? We don't really think about soil quality, but we think about how delicious a radish is or how delicious lettuce is, right? So that type of translation was really something that the penny sort of dropped for me about this community. And it was really, but the program that we developed at Beard, as powerful as it was pretty elite and pretty closed. And so I wanted to take it to more and more people. There are hundreds of thousands of restaurants around America, and they're on every street corner. If we could get everyone to do the types of things that these three champions here in Nashville have done and others in Nashville have done, we'd be in a good space.
Indeed. So you've already outlined the advocacy for the James Beard Chefs Boot Camp for Policy and Change. How about people who aren't able, like you said, to participate? How would they take that to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have, but chefs are kind of uniquely positioned. There are sort of three places for advocacy, all of us, right? There's the advocacy that we can do on our table, right? Who we choose to shop from, who we choose, what restaurants we choose to go to. Every single one of those is a validation of a system that we want or don't want, right? And so that is actually the number one thing anybody can do. And certainly the economic power that chefs have really drive that. The other piece is this community involvement, right? We all have the power to get more involved in our local communities, whether that's as a volunteer, whether that's a dedicated donor to one cause and not 100 causes, right? And then there's the policy piece. Like, policy is harder. It's long tail, right? It takes 3 to 5 years to get anything done at the city council level or Congress, doesn't matter. And it also feels very dysfunctional, right? It always feels like people are yelling at each other, people are judging each other, and everybody's stupid. And I feel like the book is hopefully a recipe for how you find your way past that. Because I believe, and chefs are so successful at this, that successful advocacy is actually built off a conversation. And when we stop having conversations with each other, we stop making progress. And so the book itself is all a recipe on how to open conversations, right? How to start them, how to approach difficult subjects, how to figure out your audience. And so that type of work, I think anybody can do, right?
Even on the micro steps, you don't have to be intimidated by it. You can still get involved.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the first step in anything is just taking the initiative to do it, right? To learn a little bit more about a cause or an issue that you might care about, or go up and talk to somebody about, why they do that. I mean, we'll get to these three amazing folks, but they all do such interesting things within their community, and it can serve as guides to folks in their community and use their restaurants as platforms if they choose to. And I just think, all progress starts with a single step. And hopefully there's a little bit of a recipe in the book for the non-chef or the community person on how to focus your efforts, take that first step, and open up that first conversation towards change.
So a question for the chefs. How have you applied techniques from the book to support causes you hold dear, particularly in areas like hunger relief, food waste reduction, and fighting discrimination in the culinary industry?
Anyone?
Sure. I'll jump in on that one. I think one thing that comes to mind is the power of community. And it's, and in the book, Katherine, you talk about connections. And like, I think as restaurants, to me, I did that boot camp with the James Beard Foundation, and it really opened my eyes. I didn't realize how connected restaurants are and chefs are. And I think most people underestimate their individual connections in a community. And coming out of that program, it was illuminating because I all of a sudden realized that I was just a phone call away from many people. Not only did I have a community of restaurants that we were able to activate for the downtown welcome table at the Haywood Street congregation to get restaurants to start preparing meals for the community and people in need just by quick phone calls. And whenever there's something urgent that's happening that we need to jump on, I feel like the three of us and the chef restaurant community here in Asheville, we send an email and it's like people jump on because both our guests and customers and also each other. And it's really that power of understanding connection and community and how you can use that for real change.
Mayor Juan, you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think, from the boot camp that I went to, which is the first time I really got to interact with Katherine, and since at the time in between, I think the three things I kind of took away were, first, that mindset that with the privilege of having a successful enterprise, a restaurant, comes an obligation to advocate for the things you believe in. And then the second was sort of like how to prepare for that moment. That when that governor does come to your restaurant, or you get called up by the State Department, wherever it is, where you have a moment in front of the right person, how do you leverage that moment to, again, advocate for what you want? And there's, a whole bunch of techniques in the book that talk about that. And that was a complete eye opener for me. But I think the part where it's had the biggest impact was just at the local level, recognizing that not just me, but anybody that works in our restaurant group, we have the influence, if you will, within the community, because as you were saying, we sit at this nexus of so much going on, social issues, economic issues, labor issues, that we can use the same ideas locally at the local level. And I think that's where we've had the most success with some of the ideas from the book. I mean, I know you mentioned specific things, food scarcity, diversity, exclusion. All of those are issues that happen on a day-to-day basis at the restaurant amongst your team and amongst the staff. And the principles are just work from the top level all the way down to the bottom level in terms of using them to see the change you wish to see, whether it's with your team, your staff, your community, your suppliers, your vendors, all the way up to, the State Department or the White House.
Could any of you elaborate on why the causes of immigration, sustainability, and community engagement are significant to you specifically?
I can jump in on that. I think really for me, the focus was sustainability. Jokes aside, but I'm a redneck from West Virginia. Growing up, my grandparents had a farm. They were very meager folks that lived off the land. And they were very sustainable before it was the Brooklyn hipster, trend, right, to be canning and pickling and, having honeybees to pollinate your garden. But for me, it was, as I became a restaurateur, it was this idea of, I wanted to have delicious food in my restaurant. So how do I do that, right? I regressed back, remembered back to my grandparents and thought, God, my grandmother's food was so amazing. And why was that? And it was this idea of freshness, but translating that into a restaurant in a downtown urban setting, how can you have that concept? And it's about, as Katie mentioned, it's about this connection with community. And we are all very fortunate here in the Asheville area. There's so many great farms and there's so many great people that think about where food comes from, how it's being produced, and what the ramifications are, not just on the environment, but also economically upon the community. And to me, it was this idea of like, how do I take these things? Because I just cook the food, right? But it's bigger than that. And I think when I had the opportunity to meet Katherine years ago, she looked at me one day and she said, "You are powerful. Your voice is powerful. Don't forget it." And kind of walked away from that like, wait, I don't know, I had to marinate on it a little bit, right? Cooking jokes, but you know, it was, and it really, it changed my purview of how I operate my restaurants. I think I was still operating the same, you know, the same ideals as Katie and Marwan are, but I hadn't really put two and two together. And it was this idea of like, you are at the epicenter of the community, and it is your job not just to operate sustainably in terms of the environment, but also in terms of your impact on the community.
And I would add that, you know, those three things, you know, you're talking about immigration, sustainability, and community. I mean, they touch on the three main areas that we in restaurants are directly connected to. I mean, there's on the immigration, that's the labor piece, right? That there's some issues there that we're directly connected with. Then there's also on the sustainability, that's our suppliers. Those are the people that we purchase from, our vendors, and the community are the people who are dining with us, or our fellow community members and other restaurateurs. And I think, you know, I never realized, you know, I know this, I never realized how much of an impact restaurants had in those three areas until we all went through what we went through with the pandemic. I mean, when we closed, we saw firsthand the ripple effects to all of our employees, hundreds of employees who now didn't have work because we didn't have any way to pay them. And, you know, and our suppliers, our farmers, the sustainability, we choose to pick local farmers because we know that the future of the environment is important, and their impact and watching their sales plummet, like all of these things, and our community who now no longer had anywhere to gather and laugh and connect and feel free. And so I just think that the reason that those three areas are such a big focus is because they're for us and so important for us in advocacy, is because those are the three main pillars that we are connected to.
And I'm sorry, Catherine. Go.
Oh, no, I was just gonna add, I mean, one of the things that makes chefs and restaurateurs so powerful as advocates, especially on the policy level, is the fact that they're small business owners or business owners, right? And they're dealing with all of the sort of decisions that you have to do, whether it's from payroll and, you know, immigration policies to sustainability policies to how they interact in the community. And I've worked with nonprofit organizations around the world, and they would die to have spokespeople who have the direct privilege and access that chefs and restaurateurs do to policymakers, right? They've all referenced it, but you know, there's a governor, a city councilman, a mayor, or a presidential candidate in an American restaurant almost every single day of the week, and their staffs are in there too, and they're there asking for business, for reservations, or signing a cookbook, or they're there to have a fundraiser. And when COVID happened, and when the pandemic happened, the chefs around the country, and especially here in the South, mobilized in a way that we could not have imagined, in part because they had these giant Rolodexes where they knew all of, I just aged myself, a giant database of names and telephone numbers, right? Where they knew the people and they knew how to find them. And they could start calling them immediately, and they could start talking to them in personal terms about the impact on their communities, the impact on their businesses and their employees. And so it's just, it's a special thing that this community has that other organizations spend years and millions trying to develop, and they just have it.
Katie, I'm going to go back to you on the policy, national legislation, what you've worked for independent restaurants. Can you go into a little bit on that?
Sure, yes. You know, Katherine talks about this in her book, but when the pandemic started, a group gathered, the Independent Restaurant Coalition, and I was fortunate to get brought on pretty early in that, and to help put together a bill to save restaurants, because we realized the legislation that was being created, the Paycheck Protection Program and other things, were forgetting about our industry and how we function, and the fact that if our doors were closed, the Paycheck Protection Program wasn't going to work because we didn't have employees. And so we were just scrambling to come up with policy. And I think, you know, the point that it was both like connection. I mean, I realized very quickly I was a couple of phone calls and text messages away from the chief of staff of the White House's cell phone number, you know, and being able, because people love to dine, everybody loves to dine, they love to support. And And so to be able to have that access and that connection, to be able to tell your story to someone who has dined at your restaurant and have them listen, they listen because they understand and they care. And the last thing they want is for, you know, those places to not make it. And then you get to tell the story about how it impacts your workers, how it impacts your farmers. And that was really incredible. And then it expanded to phone calls with senators around the country. It was amazing. And Katherine, you know, I learned at the boot camp, which you put in this book, the importance of finding something personal about the person that you're going to speak with. So I specifically remember a phone call with Mark Rubio in Florida, and the senator, and like his parents were from the hospitality industry. His dad was a bartender, his mom was a hotel housekeeper. And it was so wonderful to go into that conversation talking about how restaurants are first jobs, you know, for the entire many people in the country and how important they are. And it just changed the conversation. And I think, you know, the points that you put in this book are exactly what created success that led to, you know, the Restaurant Act getting passed, which was amazing to pass, have a group of restaurants, independent restaurants fight and have a bill passed in Congress.
It's amazing and marvelous altogether. Continuing on this political slant a little bit, as we navigate an election year, how do you believe chefs and the culinary industry can engage in advocacy to address important issues facing the community and food systems? Are there specific initiatives or changes you'd like to see gaining traction on a broader scale during this time? And this question is for anyone.
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick for that. I've been hyper aware of exactly the political climate we're in and the upcoming elections. And I sort of, again, spent a lot of time thinking that what kind of impact can we with our restaurants make in the process? And I realized we have thousands and thousands and thousands of guests and customers that walk into our restaurant every day. And we're not a political institution, but we can very clearly show what we value. And if we see a connection between our guests and what we value, then I can lean into that connection to sort of inspire, engage, communicate, talk a little bit about what are you going to do this election season? What matters to you? Are you going to be apathetic or not? And we also employ we have a lot of employees, and our ability to also reach out and create that engagement. Doesn't matter which side of the political aisle they're all on. What I just don't want is apathy. What I just don't want is a sense that it's all useless anyway, so what's the point? And any engagement that we can have at that level where we say, there are things that matter, there is a point to this. It may not be a perfect solution, but it's significantly better than not participating in the process at all. I think people misunderstand the fact that what happens on the national level has such a minor impact on us at the local level, that what happens here is far more important to a certain degree to our day-to-day lives than what happens at the national. So it's almost bringing attention away from that and down to the local level, so that the decisions that are made at the state level and the city level impact our lives far more than they do at the national level.
William, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit on the sustainability front. You do work with Monterey Bay Aquarium. Can you go into a little bit about the work you do for them and just your efforts in sustainability?
Yeah, I mentioned before, you know, we do a lot of work with local food systems, with local farms, and the importance at the table really of freshness, right? But we're a restaurant, we're retail. People still want to eat seafood. So I was just thinking one day, it's like, why would I take all this time to curate a menu that is so locally sourced, it's driven into the season, into the micro seasons, and then not give a shit about where the seafood comes from? And so I started doing some research about it. And a quick side story, as a chef, right, when you're ordering food, as a quick example, let's say, I don't know, 12 years ago, I ordered 100 pounds of black grouper, and I would get in 2 50-pound fish. And they were these big, beautiful black grouper. Okay, let's say maybe 9 years ago, ordered 100 pounds of black grouper, and it was 5 fish, right? 5 years ago, it's 10 fish. And I'm going, what the hell's going on? I want these big, beautiful 50-pound fish. I start inquiring with my fishermen. I said, okay, well, why is this happening? I want the big fish. And they said, well, there aren't anymore. And I said, well, why not? And they said, because it's being overfished. And so that led me, I think as chefs, we're very inquisitive, right? We're teachers. right? We're constantly teaching our staff every day about recipes, about operations, about hospitality, about service. But we also have to teach them about where our food comes from, why it's important. And so that led me to be inquisitive and ask more questions about, where does it come from? Why is this happening? I got introduced to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and their Seafood Watch program. So they're an organization that works in conjunction with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and they help to create sustainability ratings for different types of seafood and the different federal fisheries around our country's borders. And it helped me to get smart. And I started to learn about it. And then I started to go to Capitol Hill to advocate and lobby for things like the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which helps regulate federal fisheries management. Again, through my relationship with Katherine and with the advocacy work that she taught us, we had to get out there and use our voice to learn more about it and to be more vocal about it, because I want those big fish. I want my children to be able to eat that, 20 years from now. And it takes our voice and it takes our advocacy to help do that.
It certainly does. On a local level, I would love to go into Haywood Street a little bit. The work that you've done there, just for folks that aren't familiar with the program that you established there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give a little nod to my mother, Liz Button, who's in the room, because she was, I was in the kitchen at that moment, busy, cooking, and she was out there reaching out in person, showing up on your doorstep and getting people to be involved. So basically where it started was the Downtown Welcome Table was created by the Haywood Street congregation, and they're amazing. It's an amazing program that looks at feeding people in the community in a different way. It's incredible food, and anybody can come in. There's no questions or asking whether or not you should be there or have a right to be. It's like an open ability for anyone to come. They sit at round tables. Food at one point in time in the beginning was sort of family style. It got changed a little bit because I think in the pandemic we moved away from family style, but on real plates with real glasses and with dignity. And we had this idea with the Downtown Welcome Table that chefs could prepare the food at that for those community members. And it was incredible because for me, I think about the first meal that I cooked there, and you're cooking 500 meals on a Wednesday, and just being able to go out. I mean, I cooked all those meals, and then I got to go out and I sat down at a table and I ate lunch. And that was the best moment, because you're sitting at a table with a bunch of people who you normally wouldn't meet and enjoying a meal together. And that's the power of food and cooking and restaurants, and to be able to experience that with a group of people that I normally would never have the opportunity to dine out with and eat food that was prepared by a local restaurant is really something special in our community. And I have to say, it's also this incredible community that jumped in. Our independent restaurant community is amazing, and they want to be involved in these things. And so they all said yes and have joined on, and it's still going. I mean, it changed a little bit during the pandemic, but we've gotten it back, and now we're back cooking meals at the Downtown Welcome Table. If you haven't been, you should go.
It's amazing.
It's open to everybody.
Yes, it's open to everybody.
Asheville really pulls together. They
You
really
can't get
do.
into Kurete, go to the Welcome Table.
Yeah.
The other piece that I realized, one other thing that we implemented was that we put out, we also realized that we have a captive audience when people are dining at our tables. So in the month leading up to the meal that we prepare, we put out envelopes on the table with a donation code, and we're able not to gather funding, not only to help cover, the food cost for that dinner, but also for meals to come, so that they can keep this going. So it's like this community wheel of support that once it gets started, it just continues and builds.
Marwan, I have a question for you. So how has the landscape of Indian cuisine, how have you seen it change even throughout the past? Is that a loaded question? It's a pretty loaded question.
Yeah, it's a loaded question, but it kind of speaks to, I mean, as we sort of see ourselves as chef advocates, as Catherine would say, you kind of have to find your lane. You know, where does it feel comfortable and most natural in terms of being able to speak to the issue? And for me, it's been this idea of being a cultural bridge between this place that I came from and where I live now, and constantly looking and finding ways to sort of make the two less apart as much as possible. And I think then that speaks to the bigger issues of immigration and cultural acceptance in this country. So what was the question again?
Just how yummy Indian food has
Yeah,
changed
so,
throughout.
I mean, yeah, in particular for me, I feel like, and that's why I even opened Chai Pani in the first place. I felt like for the longest time, the way Indian food was represented by that first generation of Indian immigrants didn't speak to the true experience of what it is to be Indian and what our cuisine looks like and sort of this vastness of the country. I've always argued that for most people, their first exposure to a new culture is through their food. I mean, well before any of us knew anything about Japan, we probably had Japanese food or Vietnamese food or Korean food. And cuisine acts as a gateway to another culture. And if you engage with the food, then all of a sudden you find yourself automatically, just even through the sheer sensory pleasure of the food, learning more about that culture, where it came from. I think it helps the audience and it helps the chefs too. And I think I see that happening now with Indian cuisine as we've become bolder and are sort of putting foods on the table that are more representative of the country where we come from. I feel the audience has a better understanding of what Indian culture is like. If I can have just a short vignette to illustrate the point. So all of us at various points in this group have been called up either to the State Department or the White House to cook a meal for a visiting dignitary. So last June, I was asked to come and cook a meal, a lunch for the Prime Minister of India, who was on his big summit visit to DC. So, of course, I accepted. And regardless of my political ideas of Narendra Modi, I felt like, hey, my country's asked me to come and represent being Indian in America. I'm like, this is fabulous. And the next thing you know, I'm on a call with their protocol people, and they want me to cook basically an American meal with a little Indian touch to it, put a little masala on it, right? And call it a day. And they're all earnestly looking at me and walking me through why this matters and how they try to keep things in a certain lane. And this is what they do every time with all the visiting, dignitaries. They always ask. And I'm thinking, why are you calling me up? I mean, anybody can do that. So I said, no. And the next thing you know, the vice president of the country is on the phone with me saying, can you explain why you don't want to do it this way? And I said, because this is not what the Indian experience in America is supposed to be like. I want the prime minister of the largest democracy in the world, that means politically so much for America and this country to get along, to see what the Indian experience in America is really like. I want to cook him an authentic Indian meal through the lens of now someone that lives in America, not the other way around. And she agreed. So that was my little way of kind of putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what it means to bridge that cultural divide and to see Indian food advancing one step forward and not stuck in the, well, let's put a little masala on it.
Kudos to you for, standing up. I think that's amazing.
That's the title of your book.
Yeah.
A little masala.
There you go.
You heard it here first.
I have a fun question. What's your favorite comfort food to each of you? Oh,
Fried chicken.
fried chicken. Yes.
Rocky's fried chicken, I gotta say.
Chicken pot pie, hands down.
I love freshly made guacamole and like still warm tortilla chips.
Mm.
Oh my God, all of those plus my husband's
meatballs and spaghetti.
Oh, you stole mine. I was getting ready to say that. All of that plus that. I think it's time for some questions from the audience and virtually. So we'll get started on those.
Okay, so just to let you all know, we'll take one from the live audience and then one from the virtual audience, and I'll try to, you all help me if I'm missing someone, if I haven't fully turned around. And take pity on Christine, who has to remember your question from the live audience so that it's possible to paraphrase. So live audience, somebody want to be the point of the spear? Okay.
Specific to Asheville in 2024, how do you guys think you could best leverage your advocacy in our local community this year?
The question is specific to current times, 2024 in Asheville. How can you leverage for the community?
I can jump in. I'm gonna try to make it short because this would be a very long conversation. We had an issue in the last year with public safety. And we got together and we wrote a letter to our city council, to the APD. That was not well received because there were some issues of public safety and issues that were affecting our staff and other locals in downtown. So we decided through the advocacy work that we learned through Katherine to take it up the food chain. And we took it up to the county commission, to the sheriff's department, and we were able to get some more support in town to help make our downtown a safer place. And coming together as, you know, we were all part of a letter we put together to send out, and, you know, we used our voice to make shit happen.
Also love that you said shit twice.
Well, what he just said, we were all
Yeah.
part of that. We'll give him full credit for that one.
That is exactly, I was gonna second that, yes.
Okay, so question for you, Catherine. What was the best critique or feedback that you received when your book was being edited?
Oh, wow. So I've learned so much about the publishing process and so much about editing. I had a great editor at Island Press. Her name's Emily Turner, and she's amazing. And probably the best bit of feedback was a little bit about getting out of my own way as I was writing, because I was overcomplicating even the simplest of things and telling the longest of stories and not being concise. And Emily was just like, stop, remember who your audience is, and remember what the things you want them to know. And so, yeah, but my editor was amazing, and I've learned a lot about the writing process. And I think the best piece of advice I got was know your audience and know the stories that you want to tell and tell them succinctly.
Yes.
I may have the statistic wrong, but I think somewhere in the preface of your book, it said that people spend, or overall, we spend 40% of our food budget in restaurants.
The question is, in her book, there's a preface about 40% of our food in restaurants.
Yeah, it's actually more. It's closer to 50% of every dollar spent in America is spent outside of the home on food, right? And a lot of that is in restaurants, and restaurants of all types, right? It might be your college cafeteria, it might be your workplace cafeteria, it might be a fast casual, fine dining. But we spend so much of our money outside of our home, outside of our own groceries now. And so we as consumers have influence on these folks, right? If you want, I mean, people always ask me, they're like, what's your favorite restaurant? And putting marijuana and William aside, my first three answers are usually a woman-owned restaurant in any city that I go to, because I think it is important to make sure that we see women owners and restaurateurs, right? And then I'm like, oh, and you should go here and you should go here. But like, those are conscious decisions that we make with our dollars. And so the American consumer has a ton of power and influence over how restaurants could be operating, supporting those that are operating the way you want them to, that are paying fair wages, that are doing sustainability. So that's part of our voice too.
If I can speak to that for 1 second, I mean, you know, when we had Buxton Hall Barbecue, we were sourcing these pasture-raised hogs, paying a premium for them, and so proud of, you know, how we were sourcing. And then yet at the same time, I'd be in Atlanta and down Buford Highway, my favorite Vietnamese dive, having a pork banh mi, and not thinking of the provenance of that pork, knowing fully well that for that price, I had to be fully commercial. And I had to make a choice of how, you know, I can't, on the one hand, talk about, you know, sourcing and sustainability and doing things that are good for the environment, while on the other hand, spending my money and not putting it where my mouth was. And that moment that I had, and it was a lot based on our conversations, was a game changer for me. I really now vote with my dollar when I go out to eat or buy. I'm very conscious of it.
And you can't be perfect at it. Sometimes, right. But yeah, no, it's your vote.
For the panel, what has been the most important criticism you've received in pushback for your advocacy? What have you learned from that criticism?
Why don't you just shut up and get in the kitchen and cook?
And how did you respond to that? How did you learn
We
from
went to the
that?
White House.
I went to the White House and I went to Capitol Hill and I said, I'm gonna get out of the kitchen and I'm gonna use my voice to help make change. And so I don't know, I've been to Capitol Hill probably 14 or 15 times to lobby for different acts, for different bills, food policy based, but I feel like, as Katherine had mentioned, as chefs, restaurateurs, business owners, constituents, we have an opportunity to use our voice to make change. And if you want to be in business in any community, you can't just stay within the four walls of your business, right? That's not good business. Good business is helping take care of your community and getting out there and using your voice to make change.
I don't have anything quite like that seared in my memory. There have been things, the things that are seared in my memory are more like somebody really didn't like a dish and said something really terrible about the dish that they ate, but that has nothing to do with advocacy or policy change. But I do think that what I've learned is, like, when you stand up for something, you are not everyone is going to agree with you, and they are going to say not nice things when you take a stance. But the important learning is, yes, they're loud, but it blows over. And usually they're louder, but fewer usually is the negative piece. It hurts more, but it's like, if you can focus, what I do is try to focus on the positive remarks that I'm hearing around, because those 9 times out of 10 like far outweigh the negative. And so I'd say the learning is to focus on the positive and try to know that the negative ones will blow over.
Yeah, I think similar experience, and COVID in particular brought out a lot of that criticism from, if you took a position, whether it was employee safety or whatever it was very much a very vociferous other side of the aisle that took issue with you. And I think that's the trick. It's not easy to take a position because you got to be ready for the criticism from whatever the opposite side of that position is. So I'd say there should also be something about thick skin. I think there is.
Oh, there's definitely something about thick skin, and it's interesting because it's not a long book, everyone. It's like 6 chapters and some other stuff, and it actually fits in an apron pocket. But I had somebody read every chapter and sent me comments after every chapter. And one of the chapters was very pointed about, why did I feel it was necessary to talk about labor and colonization and immigration in this book? What did that have to do with food? And yeah, exactly. And it was like, oh, clearly you're not the audience for my book. But it was just a reminder, right, that there are people out there that see this system in a different way and don't see the things that we see. And if we were to back down off a comment like that, or apologize, or say, right, then we would lose some of the power in that conversation and some of the opportunity to maybe help expand someone's thinking.
Live audience question?
In what ways, if any, have your advocacy programs impacted or plan to impact what we're feeding our children in public schools?
In what ways has your advocacy impacted what we are feeding our children in public schools?
Yeah, I think, number one, the feeding at public schools, there are so many challenges there, right? And I think one of the things that a lot of folks are working on are the access to universal school meals, that access for every child, regardless of income, gets the same meal, not a different meal, right? Not with the shame of, owing money to the school system. And so there are bills nationally, ballot initiatives nationally that are focused on that. There are policies that are put into place to produce more, purchase more local food, so that folks have greater access, children have greater access to healthy and delicious and locally sourced food. And then there are initiatives that are around access, right? So summer meal programs, backpack programs, and we saw this during COVID again, and we've seen this in cities all over the place, where the minute a school shuts down for snow or a storm or a problem, children go hungry in this country. And that is actually, in my mind, one of the most unacceptable things that we do as a country, right? Is let children go hungry and let schools pick up the slack. But that is a place where every constituent, regardless of a chef or a restaurateur, can make a difference, and let it be known that that is a policy that you would like to see change. One of the first policy days that we did ever with the chef community was we brought 50 chefs from 50 states to Washington, DC to lobby on nutrition standards under the Obama administration, right? And it was an incredibly powerful day, lots of chefs in the Capitol, and then lots of conversations about, wait, a half a cup of fruit? Like that's all? Right? Shouldn't we do better? So there are lots of policies out there, and there are lots of programs, and a lot of them are chef-centered. And I would just encourage everybody to spend a little bit more time thinking about that. Katie.
Yeah, I just want to, the other thing that I think is, important is I hear that question. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to do more in that area. And like, cause it's serious, it's important. And however, I think an important point that, Katherine puts in her book is we're more powerful if we select the one thing that we're going to focus on versus trying to solve or dabble in all of the problems in the country and the world. And so there are so many, and that one is huge. And I'm sure that there is an incredible chef who is on that and pushing for that. And I, also have to like look at, okay, we've decided this is going to be our focus. But I love.
There's an index of organizations that are in the back of the book focused on issues.
Always be selling.
Anybody else on public school food? Virtual audience question. So if there were a policy you could change, local, state, national, you just had your dream. What's waiting? What do you wish it could be? Katherine, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I actually have two. One is that the United States Congress would adopt the UN resolution to make food as a human right. Because then we would be forced as a policy making body to deliver on things related to that statement, right? And the second is I would like every state to pass a ballot initiative related to universal school meals. We could change whole economies if we did that. And we could also return dignity to families and children if we did that. And so I would encourage you, if you want to do that here in North Carolina, that I'm sure there's some folks that would do it, but those are my two.
I have two also. I'm going to go with two. One of them is a universal healthcare program. I feel like as an employer, that labor piece is really important. We have 160 employees. And, while yes, we offer health insurance and all of that, there's a whole group of people who are missing, who it's still inaccessible to. We can't cover the full cost of health insurance. So there are lots of people who opt not to have health insurance because they don't want to contribute their portion of that cost. So universal healthcare is a big one for me. Another one would be where food subsidy dollars go. Wouldn't it be amazing if smaller independent farmers and who are farming in practices that are regenerative, that will only improve the state of the planet, and that's where subsidy dollars were going? That would be incredible because we'd be paying into our future.
You took the words out of my mouth with that. That's something I've thought about for a while is that, if you go to the Midwest, there's these massive farms that get all these federal subsidies. And I know there's bigger conversations about, about economy of scale and about even, soybeans and fuel and things. But, if you look back a few generations, our country was powered by local economies through local food systems. And if we could provide those food subsidies back to the local communities and to that economy, what would it do to the economy? Right? You take small towns that have gone defunct and help bring them back to life and bring dignity back to the people that are there.
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, this entire industry, the entire food industry, the entire restaurant industry, it is inextricably linked with immigration and the labor contribution from immigration. There's just no way around it. So some sort of reform that actually allows immigrants to come and work and contribute, it would make such an incredible impact to the restaurant industry. And I'm not just saying this because, oh, well, we have a sort of a better supply of workers. No, I mean, pretty much all of the inequities in the food system we see are because there isn't a clear path for immigrant labor to come and work here. So it leads to exploitation, leads to depressed wages, leads to all kinds of problems all the way down the chain, so to speak. So fixing that problem in a way that actually acknowledges the reality of what the restaurant industry deals with in terms of the economics of it, not just up at the political level where it's build a wall, don't build a wall, build a wall. That's what I fix.
I feel like we're getting set up to run for city council here.
Yeah.
We're being interviewed and it's like, tell us about your platform.
Said it. Said it. It's my dream.
Someone was taking notes. You just got quoted on that.
Okay. We have a question from the live audience and we're almost at the top of the hour.
There we go. Catherine, 10 years ago at a boot camp in Orlando, you were talking about the very same things you're talking about now. Responsibility, sustainability, the vital importance of small local farmers. Question is, how are we doing?
I would like to try to paraphrase that. At a boot camp, you talked a lot of very important things, especially with small farmers. How are we doing?
I mean, I honestly think we're doing better than ever. I think it is the silver lining of the pandemic, which is the actual levels of federal funding that are now directed towards local food systems through the local food purchases agreement, through the local food school cooperative purchase agreements, through climate smart agriculture. There's so many more opportunities to focus especially on socially disadvantaged farmers, so Black and Native community farmers. And all of that money is sitting in this current farm bill, which is stalled. And has only been sort of extended through the end of the year. And so if you care about food, if we care about food, we have to be asking more questions and more from our members of Congress, more from our politicians about where they stand on those local economies. But we are doing so much better. I mean, we're seeing so much money flow into those opportunities, market access, land access programs. But we are far from restoring the food system that William and we all dream of, right? But we're doing, I'd give us a C- at the moment. And we could do so much more if we had a fully authorized farm bill that was focused and the climate smart ag funding was continued and not absorbed, on which other folks want that to happen. And if we continue this unprecedented investment in local food systems that Congress has approved during the pandemic as a pandemic response. So C-.
So we're at the top of the hour, and if it would be possible, Catherine, to fold in a closing remark with what's next?
Oh, sure. Do we all get a closing remark or just me? Just me. I'm the author. Oh, well, thank you. Well, first off, thank you, Christine, and thank you, William and Katie and Marwan. This is a dream. And it is a dream to be in an independent bookstore with people. And there's nothing more important than our community centers, whether they're restaurants or bookstores. So thank you to Malaprop and everybody for hosting us. I just want everybody, I think the single most important thing you could do for your community in this election year or any election year is register to vote. Go take 10 of your friends to register to vote and make sure everybody votes. I don't care how anybody votes. I mean, I do, but I don't, right? I just want people to vote. I want people to participate in the system because our system is currently controlled by a very vocal minority and not the majority of people in this country who believe in dignity and safety and humanity and fairness, right? And so that's my number one ask for everybody. The book is a recipe for change. It's know your audience, as Emily told me, that was chefs, and those are the people that I knew, but I tried to write it in a way that anybody could take from it and anybody could use it to make change in their lives and in the lives of others in their community. So I thank all of you for buying a book and coming out and supporting independent authors too, because there's nothing scarier. So thank you all very, very much. And thank you to these chefs who every day not only deliver something delicious, but something important and thoughtful, thought-provoking too. So thank you guys.
Thank you.